Okay. Uh, so I haven't done a type A in a couple weeks or something. Probably it's been a little bit of a while. So uh, let me start by asking you the question: 2468. What?
If I tell you who do we appreciate, then you would expect it. So I can't really. If I say it, then I'm gonna give you what you want. So um,
That's an interesting response. The point is, that's one of those things. That's an example of a question that tells me nothing. Doesn't matter what you say. If you say 10, that's fine too. You know. Okay, so uh, let's see. Can you tell me a little bit about your daily patterns? Any regularities? For example, if you have a job you have to go to for a certain number of hours each day, or if you get up at a certain time, go to bed at a certain time. Can you sort of just discuss your general daily regularity or lack thereof?
okay. Yeah. So yeah, I have a routine, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's a strict routine. Like it's not 600 hours military, yada yada yada. It's more like say if I have to be at work at 5:45 a.m. Typically I would leave at 4:30. Usually I never leave at 4:30. I usually end up leaving 4:45 and still am 10 to 15 minutes early. Um, like I usually, not always, but I usually try to have the same things scheduled, or at least what I know is going to be predictable. I usually try to have that scheduled, so in case if say something happens, I've got a little wiggle room. It doesn't always work out that way. Maybe 70% of the time. Um,
Would you say that you lie to yourself about how long it's going to take to get places? Or
yes, yes. I make plans in my mind that are generally close, but in reality they don't always work exactly like I think they will. Um,
if you get
and
held back, so okay, let's say you go, all right, I'm going to leave it at 8:45, and that way I'll know I'll get there on time. Now, let's say you know secretly in your head you've left yourself a 20-minute cushion. You don't really need to leave until 9:05, right? You leave at 9:05, you can
right.
just barely squeak in there on time. Now, let's say you're planning on leaving at 8:45, and you end up staying until 9:05 and leaving right at 9:05. What held you back?
Oh man, knowing that I have that cushion, usually um, knowing that,
But I mean,
like you said,
what activity did you get caught up in that prevented you from leaving at 8:45 like you planned?
overthinking about like uh okay, so your example, if I have an extra 20 minutes, I'm I'm got my shoes on, everything's hair brushed, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. Typically it's going to be I'm going to be thinking about extra things that I may or may not have done, making sure I've got my ducks in a row, thinking about what I'm going to be doing maybe the next day or the next week. Um, sometimes even the next month. Um,
Okay,
Usually,
do you have clearly defined goals for yourself over the course of short and medium and long term, or somewhat short but not really medium long term, or long but not really short? Can you give me a breakdown of your relationship with goals?
I've got maybe two long-term goals, and I have a few short-term goals. I don't have a lot of medium-term goals. Um, like say in the distant future, I know that I want to have a maybe some kind of degree Um, in the short term, sorry. Um, in the long term, I want to have a career, not necessarily a career, but some sort of mastery, um, like engineering. Um, Short term, I want to lose 10 pounds, 15 pounds. Medium, I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to work out everything, but I know that I'm going to get there.
Did the COVID stuff put a dent in your like? How easy has it been for you to adjust to all this COVID nonsense?
Um, Existentially, it's been pretty difficult. Um, Being able, like, not being able to go many places in public is kind of different for me because for me it feels like the whole world is on hold. So it's like I don't know where things are going. Um,
Which you're more likely to prioritize? Figuring out how something's going to go well or preventing something from going badly?
wow. It, like in a catastrophic sense, or
Well,
like just on a day to day basis.
let's say you are in a job training program for nuclear materials handling. Okay. Um, so, and are you most likely to have a clearer sense of what you need to do to finish that and get your certificate or whatever, or do you have a clear sense of what pitfalls you have to make sure to avoid in order to make sure you complete this thing and get the certificate? Or are they the same question?
They they both kind of sound the same to me because it's like typically um, they hand like if it's a certification route, so they're going to give you maybe a syllabus, or they're going to give you a schedule as to what classes are going to be done on what day. Your test dates are going to be on a certain day. So um, usually they're going to have some of that kind of ironed out. Typically, what I would do is I would ask, what if I can do such and such in this? Like typically, I'll try to see the quickest way to get it done.
Okay, now there's a
But
problem. There's a problem I got to tell you about though. You just got a letter from the student services, and they need some more documentation to get your to get the grant you got to pay for this to go through. Right now, it's stalled. What are you gonna do? Walk me through your thinking process, your solvency process here.
well, I mean, obviously you'd have to take care of it first. I mean, we're talking about financial aid, right? Okay, so um, that depends on was it was I previously aware that there were okay, so okay, let me ask you, okay,
You
was
had
I
gotten an
previously aware?
indication. Listen, you had gotten an indication that everything was kosher, was going to go through no problem. There should be no anticipated problems. And now you got this piece of paperwork that says you're missing a couple pieces of paperwork that the school was supposed to send to the grant people, but they never sent. Well, you don't know if they ever sent them. You ask them about it, they're like, "Well, we think we sent them." When you say, "Well, what do you mean you think you sent them?" And they're like, "Well, we think we sent them."
Well, obviously that would be pretty annoying. I would just get in contact with the school in question, make sure all my ducks are in a row. Check my emails, contact financial aid office or whoever it is.
Now, let's say there's
The
a secretary who works at this office that you end up talking to a few occasions. Are you going to try to, you're going to try to bring her a piece of coffee cake and some Starbucks and say, Dolores, it's so great to see you again? Or are you going to be like, God damn it, Dolores, I need this fucking problem solved?
I'm probably going to be a little bit nice about it because normally those kinds of people deal with these kinds of situations on a daily basis. So it would probably help to kind of cajole her a little bit. Um, it might throw her off guard, being around a bunch of, you know, I wouldn't say all college kids are spoiled, but being around, those kinds of people. If I were to show a different disposition, it would probably put her in a better mood. Um, so
Okay.
yeah, I would
I would
probably bring
probably
her some
bring her some
Starbucks.
Starbucks.
Now you have to take one of the two following classes as a general ed requirement. You got to take either astronomy or philosophy 101. Astronomy 101 or philosophy 101. Which one do you take?
Philosophy, hands down.
Okay, what if it were philosophy or mechanical engineering?
I'd probably still take philosophy.
Okay. Um. So do you have any position on, let's say, uh, drug laws in general? And if so, can you articulate your position and why you hold that position?
Which drug? There's
Well, I
just
mean,
in general.
uh, whatever distinctions you want to make.
Um, Marijuana seems to be a pretty pertinent topic right now. So I would say I do think the laws on marijuana are pretty restrictive, considering the benefits that many people have by consuming it, whether it is in CBD oil or just smoking itself. There are too many studies and too many people, like just anecdotal research. There are too many people that are benefiting from it to to go through a bunch of fucking red tape, so that the federal government can tax a drug like that to make money off of it.
Well, what do you
Um,
think about
whereas
heroin?
like,
Let's talk about something a little more challenging. Let's talk about heroin.
oh man, that's a good one. It's a drug that a lot of people seem to overdose on, um, and you can only build up so much tolerance before you end up, a lot of people end up, killing themselves over it. I have a suspicion that there are some over-the-counter drugs that actually contain heroin. Now I can't prove it, um, but
Okay.
the the cons really for me outweigh the pros of it. To be honest with you,
Okay. Do you think the government ought primarily be a body that balances competing interests among various factions and individuals in society, or ought it be primarily an institution that preserves individual rights?
I think it should do both.
So competing interests then.
Um,
If you consider rights and interests to be considered in the competing interest calculation, then the answer is competing interests, which is fine. I don't have a position. I'm not trying to say one position is more right or not. I'm trying to get a sense of what your justifications for things are. Can you justify the death penalty whether you believe in it or not for me?
I don't think so, because where do you really draw the line? If it's on a case by case basis, you could say, you would have to really, if whether one person has killed, whether somebody's killed one human or 1 million humans, what's that's probably an S, I think. I don't know.
Okay, but if you were tasked with the job of being the advocate in favor of the death penalty, it was a debate round, let's say, and you were trying to debate that yes, the death penalty is a good thing and we should keep it, what would you say?
I can only justify it on someone that has a history of, you know, I mean, if I said more than one, it would be kind of, that wouldn't be specific enough. But so, someone who shows a history of, I wouldn't say multiple murders or necessarily multiple homicides or.
I guess the best example case would be somebody who murders, gets arrested, convicted, put in jail, escapes, murders again, gets arrested, put in jail, escapes, murders again, gets arrested, put in jail. In other words, he's some sort of super escape artist. I guess that would be the ideal individual person to exemplify if you wanted to say death penalty would be justified.
Okay, so assuming that this is an ongoing thing and not just okay.
Like yeah, he's Houdini, right? They cannot keep him in a jail. He is such a good escape artist.
Yeah, I would probably, I would be for the death penalty in that regard, in that case.
Okay. Let me try a different tact here of questioning. So, can you tell me, has this been from last Monday to this Monday? Has this been a good week? Has this past week you've been feeling good, feeling bad? How have you been this past week?
Yeah, I would say good, not too extreme in any manner.
Was yesterday or today or the day before more emotionally good or worse than either of the other 2 days? Like you think today, yesterday, or forget today, yesterday, the day before, or the day before that. Were either of those 3 days notably better for some reason than the other 2 days?
No.
Okay. Is there a specific tool or appliance or kind of large ticket item that you currently have in your consumer spank bank of things you want to buy? And if so, can you tell me what it is?
Yeah, I've actually been wanting to buy a weight bench.
Do you like to work out? Have you have a history of working out?
I don't have a history of working out. I've only been doing that since maybe 2 years. And I'm not a really regular, to be honest with you. That's one of the reasons I wanted to get one. Due to the gyms being closed down, I've actually watching not only your channel but a few other people's channels have and taking the MBTI test at work kind of showed me that doing things with my body would be able to help my mind work a little better, more efficiently. So that was kind of the reason for that.
Can you tell me about your childhood?
Well, I was kind of a smart ass. Still am, not as much. I was the guy in the class where I would just shoot out random factoids that didn't really matter. I would like every time our little clique had even in high school, even every time our clique had a group, I was always kind of the guy, the leader. I didn't really fit in with the more affluent kids. If I wasn't around my friends, I pretty much kept to myself. I was more interested in like reading books.
What about your parents? How was your relationship with your parents?
Um, I guess you could probably compare. You could probably say, if you're familiar with the sitcom, The Big Bang Theory, I think my relationship with my mother was probably similar to Leonard's. Um, she was kind of doting, very not abrasive, but very domineering. Um, I had a hard time being alone. So, like if I wanted to, like I would read encyclopedias or draw or do things like that. I had a hard time getting away from people. Um, my parents divorced when I was 2 years old. So for about an 8 or 9 year stretch, I didn't see my dad. Um, excuse me, I need to. But yeah, um, I think she was well intentioned, but again, I like to. I tried to use information and knowledge and things like that to kind of like clothe myself, I guess, to kind of shield myself away from the outside world.
Okay, can
I
you?
was afraid, like outside of like the few friends that I had, I was kind of afraid to be in the outside world. I really enjoyed just learning things. I was always asking why. Why is the sky blue? Why is water wet? Um, things like that. I like the day after Dr. Seuss died, I wrote a report about it and brought it to school. I think I was in the third grade, and people laughed at me, and I didn't know. At that time, I couldn't understand because I didn't understand why people didn't like Dr. Seuss. Uh, JFK was my idol. Um, yeah.
Now, you probably are you familiar with the SI? Here's an articulation of events in the morning I did test. I'll demonstrate it and then ask you to do the same. So this morning when I got up, uh, I this is a tough one this morning. This morning I got up and down, I was up and down and up and down, and finally I got up. I started live streaming. I live streamed this morning for a stretch of time. Then I got emotional talking about my grandmother and my mom from a long time ago, and it made me tired, that FI experience. So then I went and lay down for a while, and I had a blueberry thing before I went and lay down because I was hungry too. So I was feeling kind of sick in my stomach because I eaten too much candy. And then I went and lay down for a little bit, and then I napped for a while. I got up, and Rachel was still sleeping, and so I went to go get more cigarettes, and then I came back here, and then Rachel was up, and then like that. Can you do that with today for you?
I think I just did that.
You did? When?
When I just gave you information about my childhood.
No, but I don't want it about your childhood. I want it about today.
Do you want me to create one, or do you want me to make up one?
I want you to tell me what really happened today. Like what I just told you was really what happened today. I woke up, and I live streamed, then I realized I was out of cigarette. I'm not quite sure of the order of operations because my SI is not that good. But that's what actually happened to me today when I got up. I want you to tell me what actually happened today, the equivalent series of inconsequential details.
All right, I'll give it a whirl. Today I woke up. I took a shower, brushed my teeth. I played with my cat. Um, got some coffee. I drove to pick up a futon from a store. Um, drove back. I think it took me maybe about an hour and a half one way. Um, I ate some chicken nuggets,
Okay.
and now we're
All
here.
right. So we can eliminate from our possibility, not that it was ever really in the list of likelihoods, we can eliminate ENTJ and ENFJ from our list of possibilities here. You're definitely not SI polar. So now we only have 14 more types to eliminate, 13 more types to eliminate. You're an interesting case. When you talk about your childhood, you give me a lot of indications of self-identifying as an introvert, um, and wanting more space to yourself, wanting more alone time and such. Uh, but in conversation, you're fairly expressive. So it's suggesting to me, if you were an introvert, that you're looking at an introvert with extroverted intuition in the front stack, probably. Obviously, because you're SI, probably in the front stack. So I'm working in that direction just to sort of keep you abreast of my thinking and better answers. Let me pause for a second and let me just pause for a second here and mute this here.
Well, what I was gonna say is it's funny enough because yeah, I've been called introverted my whole life, quotation marks. But um, I actually got touched by Spacey maybe 2 months ago, and he touched me as ESTJ. So, and his reasoning was most EJs don't actually always appear extroverted and kind of engaging with people. Some because with them being TE DOMs, they're worried about like working in the future and things like that. Carrying out their plans. So I thought that was
Yeah, I was leaning in that general direction as well, although I wasn't sure. I was also thinking possible. I mean, the thing is, you seem very TE, but I haven't really tested your TI yet, and it's a tricky type to test because the the polar is NI for an ESTJ. So what I really ought to be doing is trying to test the polar, which is kind of why I wanted to pause for a second. I want to think about how to approach this at this point. So let me mute again. If you have any thoughts, any other notions you think you want to share in general about yourself, and like what things you think are consistent with that typing, what things you think are inconsistent with that typing, that would be useful. But let me muse on the NI question while you do that. What did you think about that typing as ESTJ? Has it felt consistent to you in the aftermath of it with your experience and what you've read in general? Or have there been things that you think are make it questionable?
well. The thing is, like, if I give you my experience, it's only one experience. So that doesn't mean that like mine is about the whole. So even if I were typed as an ESTJ, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be just like every other ESTJ. So I've never really been like completely like traditionally focused. I've never really been that kind of person that wants to uphold, the American way. Not that I'm against it, but I've never really been um like I don't know how to
Okay,
word
so you don't
this.
identify with the traditionalist label that typically ESTJs.
Yes.
Let me try some NI kind of questions. Can you give me an example of any song you know that you think expresses the mood of playfulness?
Hmm. I can, but I can't think of the name of it. Um, maybe. Yes. It's by John Mayer. What's his? I think it's called "Can't Get Over You." No, it's I can't remember. It's in A, I think.
Okay, well, what makes a song playful?
Well, I guess it depends on the state you're in when you're taking in the song. I mean, some people think heavy metal's playful. Some people think that polka is playful. Um,
Can I ask you, are you tapping or something?
no, I had a roommate just come in. He closed the door pretty hard. Yeah.
Okay. Regardless, all right. Can you tell me what makes a song good or bad?
Um, I'm getting no video. So what make what makes a song good or bad? By what standard? Like, okay. It needs to resonate with a wider group of people, and it needs to be more universal than the other. Um, it needs to have a 4/4 rhythm. Um, it needs to have no more than 3 or 4 chords. It needs to repeat maybe 1 or 2 choruses over and over again. Um, um, a recognizable. Go ahead. Yeah, it can be like I typically use it as a mirror, depending on what kind of emotions I'm feeling. Like typically, if I'm sad, I'll listen to a sad song. If I'm looking for a different kind of experience, yeah, I guess.
Is it lyrics, melody, or something else that's the most important factor in what makes a song sad?
Probably probably the lyrics I think would be the thing that gives it away. Because there are a lot of songs that have, I guess, they're in a major chord or excuse me, major key. They may have a happy melody, but if you listen to the words, that would probably be a better way to figure out, what the song is actually about, rather
All right.
than just listening completely to the music.
Well, you're a musician, obviously, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about film. Are you a filmmaker?
No.
Okay. Can you name a couple of movies that you like a lot?
Inception is really good. Um, Recently, I don't think I've seen anything great recently. Unforgiven is a great one.
What makes a movie good?
There needs to be a lot of tension. and the plot. There needs to be of there needs to be a great struggle. It doesn't always have to be, black and white, like Jason Bourne or, like a Justice League kind of a movie, but there needs to be some sort of a conflict that gets resolved. I wouldn't say not only in the physical world, but maybe, I like ideological undertones. I like, I wouldn't say necessarily religious, but, kind of what I was going back to with Inception, like you're toying with the idea of bending someone's reality just through, the power of thought. I like those kinds of themes.
Okay, let me switch gears here and do some TI questions on you. Okay, can you tell me if the following syllogisms are valid or invalid? I'll give you a few. The first one is all dogs have fur. This animal is a dog, therefore this animal has fur. Valid or invalid?
I would say it's invalid.
Okay, why?
You haven't concluded that this animal is a dog.
What did I conclude? Did I forget something I concluded? All right, so let's try another one. Only igloos are made out of ice. This is an igloo, therefore it's made out of ice. Valid or invalid?
Valid.
Okay, that's
Nope,
invalid.
that's valid. No?
Invalid. Just because only igloos are made out of ice doesn't mean all igloos are made out of ice. Okay, let's try a different kind of TI question. I'm going to do the genealogy kind of question. Who is my mother's husband's wife's only daughter in relation to me?
Mother's husband's wife's only daughter. So grandmother's husband's only daughter. So it would be my aunt.
No, it's my mother.
Or my mother? Yeah, right.
My
Okay.
mother's husband's wife's only daughter is my mother. Okay, but it's interesting. You remembered these steps well. So let's try another one of these. Okay, my father's wife's only son's sister's father's wife's only son's sister's father. What is their relation to me?
Okay. Can you repeat that like one more time?
Yes. My father's wife's only son's sister's father's wife's only son's sister's father.
Would that be me?
It'd be my father.
You're okay.
Yeah. It just goes around in a circle. Okay, so, all right. Interesting. Let me ask you yet a third kind of TI question, which is this kind. If all horses have saddles, and some saddles are made out of leather, can we conclude that some horses have saddles made out of leather? If all horses have saddles, and some saddles are made out of leather, can we conclude that some horses have saddles made out of leather? I will repeat it a third time, just for the sake of drama. Okay, for the sake of drama, I'll repeat it a third time. If all horses have saddles, and some saddles are made out of leather, can we conclude that some horses have saddles made of leather?
Yes.
No. The answer is no. Okay, that's fine. So here's the thing. Uh, what I'm hearing from you is a general processing of TI as TI is sort of supposed to be processed. You're not confused by the questions, but I didn't really start at the very basicest level, so I'm not. I'm pretty sure you're not TI polar. But let me do a couple of basic level ones and make sure that it's just backstack and not polar. Let me ask this one: Who is my father's wife in relation to me?
It would be my mother or my stepmother.
Right. Okay. Who is my mother's sister's child in relation to me?
My cousin.
Okay, fine. Who is my maternal grandmother's husband's only daughter?
It would be my grandmother.
No, it'd be my mother.
Mother. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm pretty confident you're not polar because you understand the process of TI. It's just something you're not practiced in doing, and so it comes across hit and miss. Um, so now I'm left with a few possible things here. You could be an ESTJ. You could also be an ISFP in theory. You're not an ESFP. You could be an ISTJ maybe, but whether or not you're introverted or extroverted, see that's a tricky one because if you've got an extroverted interface function, you're going to come across in certain spells more extroverted. Like when Cameron comes over, he's an ISTJ, and he will talk Rachel's ear off because she's a great listener and will just encourage him to continue talking. Like, oh, tell me more about these electric scooters. Can you tell me a bit of the kind of things that you're into, like with your spare time? What do you do with your spare time as hobbies or fun activities or whatever?
Yeah. I like to play guitar. Um, when I need to really, really get alone, I like to drive late at night. Sometimes, like most of the time, I listen to music that I like. I don't really listen to the radio a lot. Sometimes I will run at a park a few days a week, a public park. Um, I like to research different philosophers. I do work a lot. Not obviously not right now due to the virus, but I do work a lot. Um,
What kind of work do you do?
I'm actually in manufacturing. I work on a production line. Um,
That's a high
and
quality blue collar job you got there.
it is incredible. Um, and obviously I do work out now.
Tell me about your relationships with, romantic relationships.
I They are typically kind of extreme. They're either not at all or all. Um, most of them are, I would say, most of them are kind of usually leave as they come. Um, I'm a very intense person when it comes to that kind of thing. Um, I know what I like and I know what I don't like when it comes to that.
Now, are you somebody who goes in feeling a lot and going yes, and then realizing oh no, or are you somebody who goes in knowing ahead of time this is going to be intense, but it's not going to be long term, or what?
Right, right. Like typically, like not as much now, but as a teenager, like I would really be, I'd be like uber romantic. I like write poems and write songs and all that kind of thing until I realized that most of the women that I were involved with didn't appreciate that as much. So I kind of toned it down a little bit. But I still like to go in, um, with a very open demeanor and open attitude, and um, very intense. And typically, you know, within a couple of days or a couple of weeks, I'll know whether that person is gonna be long term oriented or not. Um,
Okay. What? Tell me, red and green flags in women for you.
red flags and green flags. Green flags. Okay, I think that's probably easier. Green flags. I like women that are into animals. Don't not necessarily have to be good with kids or even like kids. I'm not, but typically women who are good with animals are typically good people. They typically have good character. I like artistic women. Um, I like women who are not afraid to like like I'm not afraid with a woman to tell me where I stand. I'm not really a mind reader. Um, um, what's another green flag?
If she wants you to fix shit around her house, is that good for you or bad for you?
Mm, at my house or her house?
Her house.
It would depend on how far along, but usually I wouldn't think it's a bad. I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I would. I probably wouldn't have a problem with it. Um,
Would you look for things to fix? Like, would you notice if a door was kind of wonky and you like, this needs to be fixed, and you fix it, or would you try to avoid having to fix things?
I wouldn't avoid anything like that, but again, also wouldn't look for it unless it got to the point where it aggravated me. I'm not the kind of guy that just like tries to find fault in everybody, or everything.
No, I
Um,
don't mean like that. I mean like, would you get aggravated by it? Like every time you go past this thing, this like for example, this door right
uh,
here, right? This door. You see how it falls off like that? It's not
oh
split.
yeah, I would. Yeah, I'd get annoyed with that.
You just leave it like that. See, my dad came out this morning. He noticed this because he came in here for some reason, and he brought me one of these things to fix this
Oh,
with.
wow.
So, if your girlfriend had this at her house, you would just leave it like that, or would you fix it? Because it'll sort of
Yeah,
stay there, right? If you put it up, what would you do? Would you fix it or leave it like that?
yeah, I'd fix it.
You wouldn't be able to help yourself. Huh? Okay.
That is, yeah.
So okay, the thing is, you don't seem FE polar, so that's why I'm not really loving the ISTJ. Um,
Okay, can I ask you something?
yeah.
Okay, so they're like in different systems. Fe is always described in so many different things that like. So I guess like in your words, or like how would you term Fe? Like what are the guidelines? What does Fe consist of? Is it just social grace, or is it being attentive to cultural norms, or what?
No, it's an awareness of how everything you say might be perceived by the other person. So, for example, this is a perfect example of FE in the mix. I said to Rachel yesterday, we were driving in the car, I was squeezing her thigh, and I said, if you were a bag of chicken, you'd be nothing but thighs and legs and breasts. And she said, basically, like, are you saying I have an ugly face? And I was like, no. Obviously, you don't want chicken faces in your bag of chicken, right? But the thing is, it's like, that's FE. My FE was not on point enough to realize that when you compliment a woman in some parts of her, you have to compliment all the parts, or else she's going to deduce that you failed to compliment one part, and therefore you think that part's bad or something. You know, that's an FE kind of calculation. If you're an ESTJ, you do those sort of calculations instrumentally. Like, I should probably give this secretary a muffin. She might help me better, or be nice to her because I'm gonna have to deal with her a lot, or something like that. So ESTJs will have that kind of attitude towards FE, whereas ENTPs and INFJs, we're both very intuitive about FE stuff. So that was like a misstep on my part, because I should have intuited her likely perception of my comment before I said it. See what I'm saying? That's FE. So can you tell me about your relationship with FE as I just described it?
Um, it's been hit or miss. I've been called an asshole a few times, especially when I was a teenager. So I used to like I I don't always filter my words. I do sometimes. It's kind of like it really just depends on the situation. Like FE, like I like I like to be somewhat sensitive to what other people think, but I also don't like to be inaccurate. I also don't like to disregard facts. Um, I mean,
All right, let me get Rachel to chime in here a bit now on this question. So, Rachel, you've been listening over there from the green chair, and what are your thoughts in general about introversion, extroversion, or just in general? What are your thoughts?
What I've noticed is people who like to talk a lot. They're not afraid to be out in the world. They're very busy people usually, and that's where they find more comfort. Like I know, so like my dad's an ENFP, and if he doesn't go out and see people, even if it's just like the mailman or a neighbor, for a while, he gets very depressed. He gets enlivened by being around people and talking and being active. Whereas I like going out and being active. I like being with my friends, being active. I like going to the movies. I go into, the museums. I like, which I even think is such like a introverted thing, going to museums. But and like I do like hiking and stuff, but I prefer to do that with a friend. Like I don't go seeking that out by myself.
Okay, so I would know about your going out thing you were just saying. Like one thing my dad does, he wants a certain amount of social interaction, but always on his terms. And so in that regard, he's kind of like an introvert. He goes out on walks and he sees the neighbors and he talks to them briefly, and then he comes back here and he reads his book and he does his thing. And he likes to have brief social interactions with a variety of people, often instrumental, on his own terms. He's an ESTJ. So you might think he was an introvert if you looked at his overall sort of choice of time he spends. He spends a lot of time by himself, and it's not for lack of opportunity to spend time with us. He just doesn't really want to. So did that resonate with you as far as your relationship with extroversion and introversion, or can you describe your own relationship with extroversion and introversion in those kind of terms?
it's funny because okay, so um, like when I'm listening to you speak, I can clearly see the difference in communication in between being a sensor and with you guys being intuitives. Because not only the articulation, but the degree of detail with which you're defining all of these different terms. And I'm like, okay, so I'm on like ground zero right now. So, it is cool. Go ahead.
Here's my overall take on the matter. I think Spacey was right. I think you're an ESTJ. Spacey is right that ESTJs can self-identify as a lot more introverted than their function stack, because their extroverted TE, extrovert function TE is not really a social function, it's a solvency function. I see you very comfortable talking, and that's consistent with third slot NE more than fourth slot NE. I see your FE is instrumental, and that's consistent with not polar, which means you're looking at not ISTJ.
I have a question. How are you with taking care of like details when it comes to like business interactions? Like, are you good with paying your bills on time? And do you think it's really important to have like a 401k? Like, do you plan for future things? Yeah.
I do plan for some things in the future. I don't have like my 20-year plan or anything, but I have a couple of specific things that I want to do. Paying bills on time. I've gotten behind before. As a matter, I am behind on a couple of things right now, but typically I don't. Because I'm in the ESTJ, right? So I can kind of crunch numbers and be like, hey, if I spend this much this month, I'm gonna have this much left to pay for this and this much for this, So yeah, typically I don't. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. I'm pretty sure you're an ESTJ. I can't get to 100% with this particular type because I don't have a solid NI polar test, and the distinctions between ISTJ and ESTJ, I mean, what else could you possibly be? ISFP? No, you're too talkative. ESFP? No, you're not TI polar.
No, the only other thing is maybe ISTP.
ISTP? No, he's not TI Dom. So you're left with you're in the quadra with the STJs and the NFPs. Now, you're not an ENFP because you're not TI polar, and you're not an INFP because you do too much shit. And you're obviously not an INFP, because if you were an INFP, you wouldn't be able to answer any questions. You'd just be like, well, it really depends, and I just don't know, and yeah. INFPs are they just can't answer any questions, so you're not an INFP. So that puts us in the STJ department, process of elimination, and I'm going to say Spacey's right. You're an ESTJ that's whose own experience is that FE has been imposed on you. That's to say, social interaction, and what you wanted was solvency-based or systems interaction. And so that pushed you into areas where you could do systems interaction uninterrupted, that is to say, solo activities. That seems to be the best explanation I can come up with for why it is that ESTJs can sometimes self-identify or think of themselves, or often display as, more introverted than other extroverts. Is that the correct explanation? I don't know. But if I were going to, if there were some, if God were to come down and officially declare everyone's types so we could check, I'd put good money on you being ESTJ.
Do you do you think that rules are important to regulate and kind of keep things going? Like they're there for a reason?
I guess for the most part, I would say so, not all the time. I think that some rules are kind of what's the word, pedantic? Have like split hairs.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, I think the rules are a good thing. I think if you don't treat them as like set in stone rules and more like guidelines, I think. Like the situation that has going on, but I think the government would do well to show more faith in citizens rather than making everybody stay the fuck at home.
Yeah.
I think that people would have more trust in our government if they would show
They need to flatten their nerves. What they need to do. They need
Right,
to flatten
yeah.
their nerve. Alarmists. Okay, so look, the thing is that's also not inconsistent at all with ESTJ. My dad, note, has a PhD in philosophy. You talked about your philosophy interest, right? My dad, who's an ESTJ,
Yes.
who is the textbook ESTJ, he has his PhD in philosophy. So this is not inconsistent with ESTJ, even though people think it is. All right, ESTJs get into what they get into, and they get good at what they get good at, or what they get into. Right? They get good at what they get into, and they get into what they get into.
Yeah.
So, it's like you're a good musician. I might normally think that NI is important in music making, right? But if I have an ESTJ friend, Alarino, my dad was a French horn player too, and he played in the military band. And as a matter of fact, there's a TE approach to music that rewards people with good TE by they learn scales and music theory and skills and chops and all that kind of stuff and become very good musicians as a consequence. So that's not inconsistent, even though people think it is. It's also consistent with the ESTJ because it's third slot extroverted intuition. Talking, expression, music, and stuff is for you. It's a selfish function. It's how you feel your juice and your reward. There's nothing wrong with that. We all have our selfish third slot function. And so things that we might normally think of as inconsistent with the ESTJ, I don't necessarily see as inconsistent with the ESTJ at all, because ESTJ is a particularist type. What they become good at and all about is driven by their circumstances and particular situation, but they all have the same sort of movement, progression forward approach towards everything that seems consistent with everything you told me. So I will now leave the floor open to you to raise objections, concerns, complaints, queries, considerations not yet mentioned, or other stuff you want to say.
Okay. So, man, I do have. Okay, so. Okay.
Say at work you have a group project. Would you rather be the leader or one of the leaders? Or would you rather delegate things?
Have things delegated to you.
Yeah, have things delegated to you.
I don't like to have. I don't like to be delegated to. I would rather be one of the ones that make decisions. Unless the person that was delegating to me was above my position. I may not be the guy that knows everything, and usually I'm not. But I am the guy that knows how to know everything. So
I'm ESTJ.
Yeah. That
I'm
sounds
confident.
like a confident person.
Yeah, ESTJs, I want to just say thank you to you and all the other ESTJs out there in the world for making people like me and Rachel possible.
Yeah.
How would Rachel and I survive if we didn't have ESTJ parents in our lives to take care of us? It would be terrible.
Not really sure. I'd probably be.
well, okay. So I do have a question with NE because with ESTJ being a censor and being a traditionalist, it baffles me how. I guess really maybe I don't understand enough about NE, but it's like how it works in the third slot. Like how does that come out in somebody that's traditional?
Okay, so the traditionalist shit is bullshit. Okay, SI is about what they have learned, whether what they have learned is a bunch of traditionalism or not, and how they react to that traditionalism is specific and contingent. My dad was raised in a sort of Amishy
Yeah.
household, not Amish, but Mennonite-ish, like hardcore religious,
Seems
right?
like it.
And he came out of that household an atheist who traveled the world, embraced cars in Europe, and came back to the United States and got his PhD in philosophy, and now is just all that kind of shit. Why? Because he's a smart guy. ESTJs are smart, and they come to their own conclusions. Nothing's really universalist for them, so they're always using their particularist solvency approach towards every single thing they encounter. And you might approach any given particular problem in your life as something that you need to have additional clarity about. You'll attain that clarity one way or the other. The extroverted intuition in the third slot means you feel most joy when you're extrovertedly intuiting. Now, that's going to be a more sensory kind of extroverted intuition than mine. So I might feel most joy when I'm making up something on the fly. Whereas you're probably more likely to feel joy if you are improvising. It's going to be in a given key, in a given scale or something. And if you're not improvising, then you probably feel more comfortable playing songs you've practiced before and executing those songs, or practicing songs you're working on or something, or potentially coming up with new songs too. It certainly is the case that ESTJs do write music. It's talking to you about music reminds me of talking to my ESTJ friend Alarino about music, because he says similar things about, like, well, this is how you have a hit. It needs to have a few chords. It needs to blah blah blah. He's describing NI rather than using it. And
That clears up a lot. Okay, so I think I have one more question. Go ahead. Okay. So what? Okay. So now, what does the mind do to kind of account for the polar function, and how does NI work in the polar function?
Okay, so NI works in the polar function where you won't recognize when something's a determinant factor to the thing. So, like, my dad made contingency plans for what to do if the current nursing home failed to complete the paperwork they needed to complete to get the long-term care insurance to pay for its part of the bill, okay? Now, to me, that's not going to happen. It's not acceptable that happens. I'll go fucking tear their heads out before that happens, But my dad says, well, we don't know for sure until it does happen. Until I've experienced it, I don't know. Until we've actually experienced it, I got the letter from them saying, yes, we've completed all the paperwork, I don't know if they're actually going to complete all the paperwork. So I can't predicate forthgoing behaviors or plans on that assumption until that's set in stone experientially for me.
Yeah, like, would that piss you off?
It would.
Yeah, because you wouldn't be able to make contingency plans going forward. You'd have to make contingency plans going forward because you wouldn't recognize that this is low likelihood enough and unacceptable enough an alternative that I don't need to plan for it actually happening. That's NI-polar. Another way that NI-polar is like, another example from my dad is, one day my mom would have a good day and he'd say, oh, we can take her to Hawaii. The next day, she'd have a bad day and he'd say, I don't think we're going to be able to take her to Hawaii. The next day, she'd have a good day and he'd go, hey, I think we're going to be able to take her to Hawaii. And it was like, he didn't notice that it was just dependent on the day as to whether he thought it was going to be a likely thing to happen or not. That's NI-polar as well. Now, what can you do to work on it? I don't know. Working on my polar means, like, this morning I live streamed, somebody brought up some sad memories for me, or I brought up some memories that linked to some sad memories, I guess. And I got emotional, and then I had to go take a nap. Because I don't know what to do with my feelings. I think that's the thing with you, probably. If you're compelled to deal with what's determinant factor, what's the most relevant and most determinant factor in things, you probably just go like, okay, I gotta go to sleep.
Okay. Yeah, no, I've been watching your videos for probably like maybe 2 years now. So it's interesting to see how how you defined the functions, because really, like, there's everybody likes to put a border on like where the functions end and how much does this and how much does that, but there's not, to me, like, one person's FE may be somebody else's something else. Like that's just my opinion. I might be wrong, but there's not enough room for people to kind of think for themselves, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's something that people only usually only people with TI and first and second slot think that can be determinedly figured out, really, or insist that it must be able to be or something. So it's what you're saying is consistent with fifth slot TI and also consistent with ESTJ. So this has been a lot of fun. I got to tell you, by the way, this has been a fun typing.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed typing you. ESTJs do not come across them very often in the typological community,
True.
but it's just like the philosophy PhD my dad has, right? You wouldn't think philosophy PhD correlates with ESTJ if you look at type descriptions. That's why you can't look at those things. You got to look at actual process analyses. That's what I have said.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sold.
All right, cool. So, thanks a lot. Do you want me, or are you okay with me publishing this?
Yeah, please.
Okay, great. Thank you. I will publish it right now then, and I enjoyed this a lot.
Do you use PayPal or
Yes, I PayPal
whatever?
my email address.
Okay.
All right, cool.